My name's Emily, and today I'm going to be talking about, in no particular order, 12 books an artist should own. Book number 12, Name That Style. I really like this art book because it describes 14 of the big major art style eras and what was going on and major people that were involved in them. He takes one page, he talks about the art style, he gives an example, and it's very straightforward. So it's a good way if somebody's a new artist for them to get familiar without feeling like they're getting bogged down in a huge art class. But it's also good for someone who's experienced and is trying to explain it to somebody, a friend, a family member, or someone that's getting interested. This is a good way to do it without being intimidating or overwhelming, and it's a good way to brush up on your own knowledge. Book number 11, Realistic Drawing Secrets. I recommend this book because it's a good way to take your drawing to the next level once you've started becoming more adequate. It also has a lot of useful information in it about drawing, the tools that you're using, and it's just a great reference material book for any artist to have or to have a book like it. Book number 10, Atlas of Anatomy for the Artist. I don't necessarily recommend this book specifically. It is a great anatomy book, but there are a lot of great anatomy books. I have many. I've got all kinds of anatomy books all the time. When it comes to learning anatomy, everyone's going to learn it differently, and it's just like reading a passage in a book, where the first time maybe you don't get what they're saying, but then someone paraphrases it and the light goes on. I think that any artist worth their salt has at least one anatomy book, but it might take a while until you find one that you really enjoy that helps you get that understanding of anatomy that you need to take your art further. Book number 9, Drawing Dynamic Hands. This book goes in tandem with the anatomy book. The only reason I list it separately is because hands are so difficult, so having a book just for drawing hands is great. I've also recommended this book in another video. Drawing hands is difficult. Even somebody who doesn't know anything about art can tell when you're not drawing them correctly, so having a good reference material for drawing hands to help get your mind in the right place so that you can get your painting, your drawing done where you want it to be done is great. Book number 8, Encaustic Mixed Media. I like this book. It's very colorful. As artists, we tend to be very visual, so getting examples of how to do things step by step is great. If you don't know what encaustic painting is where you have a highly pigmented wax, and that's what you use as your medium. You're going to need a different sort of canvas, something more sturdy than a cotton, so they tend to be done on some sort of masonite board that's primed. Also, you're going to need a whole different amount of materials. You're going to need a heat gun. You're going to need probably like a griddle of some kind to keep the waxes warm. It's a whole different involved process. You also want a well-ventilated area because these pigments can have things in them like cadmium, as in like cadmium red. And when you breathe that in, that can be dangerous. Encaustics may not be something that an artist is into, but it is a mixed media that could be fun to explore. So this is a good book for an artist to have, even if they're not going to be doing encaustics. Maybe they might want to add some materials to it, or maybe it's just a fun read for them and one day they'll pick it up. Book number 7, Mixed Media Photography Book. I selected this book because as artists, we can't always be painting and drawing. Sometimes the situation doesn't allow for it, time doesn't allow for it, and so the only way we start digesting the world and what we see is through our camera and taking photographs, and that's great. I enjoy a lot of different types of mixed media. I enjoy seeing what people can do when they stitch things together and they try to make something new. And the one thing that I would ask that they try to do is to combine their own photography with the work they're doing instead of constantly pulling from the internet or some unsuspecting source. Ethically, you should be taking the photography from somebody who is allowing it, somebody from Pixabay or Unsplash, something like that. Combining photography with other media is a lot of fun, and this book is a good way to start that going or to get some ideas as to how you can do that and have a really fun project at the end. So if somebody is an artist, chances are they're taking photos. If somebody's a human being, chances are they're taking photos. So this is a good book to have in your collection. Book number 6, Abstract Painting. I suggest this book because even if you're not an abstract artist, you shouldn't be ignorant to abstract art and where their techniques and where some of their ideas can be really beneficial to you. I consider a strong artist to be somebody that is versed in other forms of art than just their own. They may never want to paint an abstract painting, but they may take some of those techniques and use them in their final work. Here's one of my paintings where I used some dripping technique and some combined mixed media in it. I used newspaper for the tree, and I have this sort of surreal dripping of water. The painting's not abstract, but I learned from abstract techniques. Book number 5, Acrylic Painting, Mediums and Methods, a contemporary guide to materials, techniques, and applications. When I was young and in college, I could not afford to do a whole lot of oil painting, so I learned a lot about how to work with acrylics. And this book I recommend because it has so many beautiful illustrations and it's very straightforward. So you don't have to be painting like a French Impressionist to enjoy this. And you can also learn about washes versus glazes, all of that. And that can be somewhat confusing for some artists. I really used it as a great reference guide for some ideas when I wanted to do certain things with acrylics. Book number 4, The Student's Guide to Painting. This is a very helpful book if you're trying to work on your oil painting techniques and how to work with oil painting. Oil painting can be intimidating for the same reason that acrylic painting can be intimidating. There are lots of other mediums, tips and tricks of the trade, and when you're going into it and you don't know why people are doing what they're doing or how to further your work, it's always great to get a guide. This one's good for oil painting. We'll talk about the different materials that you use, the techniques, and the methods for it. Book number 3, The Acrylic Book, a comprehensive resource for artists. This book is a book that I've enjoyed and I've used for a really long time. The only problem with it is that it is incredibly dry. This book is not going to be very friendly. It is not in color. But what it does offer is a lot of explanations, and it sort of acts like that quick nitty-gritty Google search where it just immediately will give you the information that you're looking for, such as a graph on what to use and how to use it. So I don't say that this book is very beautiful. It's not very visually stimulating, but if you're just wanting to know immediately, what does this do? Where do I apply it? How do I use it? This book will get you right there. It's not a very big book, and I've had it for years, and it's never steered me wrong. Book number 2, Japanese ink painting. In my opinion, an artist should have a book about Japanese ink painting. It's easy to forget that artists like Van Gogh were inspired by Japanese prints, as was Monet. Many artists are inspired by the Japanese because of their line work and their style. Also, as an American talking about art, we don't often discuss Asian artwork. We mostly focus on the European artists, Michelangelo, Leonardo, Raphael. We don't talk about what was also going on in Japan or in China or in Africa, which is why this book's helpful for an artist to have. You should expand beyond what was just affecting you as someone who's either in a Western society or who was taught art in a Western school. Book recommendation number 1, African art. Like I mentioned with the Japanese art, as somebody who grew up in America and is part of a Western society, we don't always talk about or study the artworks by other people. We can typically name a good handful of European artists or American artists, but then when it comes to African artists or their styles or what that artwork is expressing, we can get lost. So it's always great to have a book about African art as well. That book is good because it looks at many different areas of Africa and also the art behind it, the symbolism. If you didn't know, African art was taken by the British, the Dutch, the French, and other countries during their imperialism and colonial periods. So African art did have an impact on art as we know it. So it's good to look at the source, see what's going on. There's even ghost stories of certain pieces of African art being taken and the curators of those museums meeting untimely deaths. As an artist, I think you should own books and reference materials and read about different areas and different places that have done art and how they went about it and how they were expressing themselves. Because when you're stuck in your own culture, it can be hard to think outside your own cultural box. So looking at other cultures and their history and how they went about it can sometimes turn on lights that weren't turned on before, and you can make some amazing works because of it. And so I think great artists have books and reference materials from other cultures and other time periods of painting. So that's it. So that's 12 books that I think an artist should buy and why. While it doesn't have to specifically be those books that I listed, I think you can understand as the viewer that I'm saying that a book like this, a book about anatomy, a book about acrylics, a book about oils, it's always good to have reference material at your fingertips. And for me, at least, I'm a very visual person. Sometimes Googling things on the internet isn't that great, but also when I'm looking at things, I might have paint on my hands and I don't want to pull out my laptop. And it is easier just to grab that book and to look at it, especially for anatomy. At least for me, anatomy was something that I worked really hard on, and I'm still working really hard on. So I tend to collect anatomy books and really look at them, because sometimes the way a muscle is illustrated is what helps me see why things are the way they are. And perhaps in a different video, I'll discuss truly why it is that we need to study anatomy, and also why we need to draw naked people. What is the point? They're wearing clothes anyway, right? Those are just some of my thoughts. I know right now there's a whole sort of Lensa AI art generated drama going on, so I may begin talking about that. Christmas is also coming, so it might be more helpful for me to do a Christmas gift idea list. I haven't quite decided, but I'm going to be continuing to work on different videos, and I hope that you enjoy them. Please check out my other stuff and leave a comment down below.